Chapter 25, the Urinary System, Part 1, your table of contents, and we are going to start from the urinary system functions. First of all, our urinary system, our kidneys, they clean our blood from everything we do not need. Those would be toxins, metabolic wastes, and excess ions, any ions, sodium, calcium, whatever we have too much in our blood. Next one, kidneys help to regulate our blood volume, chemical composition of the blood, and pH of the blood. Kidneys take part in the process called gluconeogenesis. During prolonged fasting, when we do not receive enough of glucose, gluconeogenesis is a process of making glucose, simple sugars, out of non-carbs like proteins. Next one, endocrine functions. Our kidneys produce two hormones, renin for regulation of blood pressure and kidney function, and erythropoietin, regulation of red blood cells production. The production happens, as you remember, in the red bone marrow, but the hormone regulating that process is produced in the kidneys. Finally, our kidneys can activate vitamin D. Urine characteristics. Usually the color of urine from pale yellow to deep amber. It's odorless or almost odorless. Volume should be from 750 milliliters to 2 liters a day, and it depends on how much you drink and how much you sweat. pH of urine can vary from slightly acidic, 4.5, to slightly alkaline, like 8, and it depends mostly on the food we consume and drinks. Specific gravity is from 1.003 to 1.3032. You need to know all those characteristics very well. Also, you need to know what should not be in the urine. First of all, no protein. Sometimes there can be traces of protein when we consume too much of them, but usually none. Leukocytes in the urine show that there is inflammation going somewhere. Then there should be no blood and no glucose. Glucose in urine usually indicates diabetes. The color of urine is determined by the breakdown products of red blood cell destruction. Remember, hemoglobin breaks into the heme and globin, and heme turns into yellow pigment called urochrome. That pigment gives color to our urine. Hydrated urine, when we are well hydrated, it's pale, almost like water-like or pale yellow, and when we are dehydrated, it becomes more intensive yellow. If urine is pink, sometimes it's nothing to worry about. For example, when you consume some berries, and especially beets, it can change a color of urine. But if it's bleeding, if there is some blood in the urine, it can be a very serious symptom. Diseases of the liver can change color of urine to dark, like cola-like, and it also requires doctor's attention. Characteristics of urine continue. Volume. Normal production up to 2 liters a day. If it's more than 2.5 liters a day, very often it can indicate diabetes. It can be irregular diabetes mellitus or diabetes insipidus, or it can mean that you consume too much of caffeine, alcohol, diuretics, or some other problems. Small amount of urine, less than 500, half a liter a day, indicates either dehydration, blood loss, diarrhea, or any problems that when we lose fluid. And finally, anuria, less than 50 milliliters per day, usually indicates kidney failure, and it's a very dangerous condition. Urinary system organs. Kidneys are located at the abdominal cavity. They are retroperitoneal, behind the peritoneal membrane, and they are major excretory organs. Urinary bladder is for storage, reservoir of urine. Urine goes from the kidneys to the bladder through the ureters, left and right, and finally urethra is the tube that transports urine out of the body. Urinary system can have anatomical variability. Some people may have just one kidney, while other people can have 3 of them. Sometimes, instead of 2 kidneys, people have 1, and those 2 kidneys merge together, fuse together, looking like a horseshoe. And in rare cases, both kidneys can be on one side of the abdominal cavity. That happens more often than you can think, but if people are healthy, they don't even know that they have those anatomical variability in urinary system. We start the anatomy of the system from urethra. Urethra is a tube that transports urine from the urinary bladder to the outside of the body. You need to know differences between male and female urethra, and those are 2 main differences. Female urethra is shorter and has only one function. It carries urine. Because it's so short and usually a little bit wider than male urethra, it's much easier for bacteria from the outside to get into urinary bladder and cause inflammation. Male urethra is much longer and it has 2 functions. It carries semen and urine. Ureter is lined mostly by pseudostratified columnar epithelium, but close to the bladder there can be some amount of transitional epithelium, and close to the opening of ureter to the outside, which is called external urethral orifice, there can be stratified squamous epithelium. There are 2 sphincters, internal and external urethral sphincters. We will talk about them at the next slide. So, bladder. Here is urinary bladder. It is located in the pelvic cavity under the peritoneal membrane, so we call its location retroperitoneal. It's lined with transitional epithelium because it's a stretchable organ. There are 2 openings for ureter, so ureter goes on the posterior side of the bladder, and that's where it opens. That's another ureter, and together with opening for urethra, they form that triangle that we call a trigone. Here it is. So voiding is regulated by autonomic nervous system that can control internal urinary sphincter. It's located right here at the very beginning of the urethra. And also we can control it voluntarily by controlling our external urethral sphincter, which is made out of their skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle of the bladder in the bladder walls is called detrusor muscle. How the process of voiding happens. Another name of urination is voiding or micturition. That's a Latin term. So it includes 3 simultaneous events. First of all, the detrusor muscle in the walls of the bladder contracts and internal urethral sphincter opens, but external urethral sphincter is under our voluntary control, except babies of course, and then we decide if we open it or not depending on time and place. Okay, the tubes connecting kidneys to the urinary bladder are called ureters. They are also retroperitoneal, approximately 30 centimeters long, and they are lined with transitional epithelium, like urinary bladder. and inside there are two layers of muscles, longitudinal and circular, and they provide contractions, peristaltic contractions, that move urine into the bladder. So doesn't matter what is position of your body, is it horizontal or even upside down, urine still will be going from the kidneys to the bladder. Before you continue, please stop the video and answer the questions for Chapter 25, Part 1.1. Let's talk about kidney anatomy now. Pay attention that is a picture of posterior view of the body. So we are looking from the back, that is the right side, and right under the liver there is a right kidney. So right kidney is located a little bit lower than the left one because it's sitting under the liver, which is a very big organ. So kidneys are retroperitoneal and they are located in superior lumbar region. Kidneys have convex lateral surface and concave medial surface. They are bean-shaped. And renal hyalum leads to the renal sinus. The difference between those two I will explain in the next slide, one of the next slides. But what exactly enters each kidney? Ureters, here they are, and also renal blood vessels, renal artery and renal vein, lymphatic vessels, and nerves. Let's continue about kidney anatomy. Here I put a different picture, not from your book, so you could see exactly 3 layers of supportive tissue surrounding the kidney. That is a transverse cut of the body, that is the kidney, and you can see that bluish line, that would be your renal fascia. That's outer layer of a dense fibrous connective tissue that anchors kidneys to surrounding tissues. Then we have a thin yellow layer that would be a perineal fat capsule, a fatty cushion surrounding the kidney. Finally, right on the surface of the kidney, we have a tough tissue surrounding it. It would be a fibrous or renal capsule. It prevents spread of infection to the kidneys. If there is any infection, happens to be in abdominal cavity. Okay, inside of the kidney, the outer layer right here it is called renal cortex. The central part right here, where you can see those structures, pyramids, that would be renal medulla. So, pyramids, each one of them, it has a triangle shape. Between 2 pyramids, what is right here is called renal column. Finally, each pyramid, if we continue it all the way right here to the cortex and draw such a triangle, including the pyramid and cortex, would be called a renal lobe. At the very top of each pyramid, this part of it is called renal papilla. The urine is produced right here, and then the urine is released out of the pyramid through the papilla. Finally, in the center right here, we have renal pelvis. Now, it's a different picture again. It just shows you minor and major calyces better. So that's one of the kidney pyramids. That's papilla on the top of it. And urine first goes from here through the papilla into the tiny tubes called minor calyces. So that's minor calyx, that's minor calyx, and that's minor calyx. Usually 2 or 3 minor calyces merge together and form major calyx, a little bit larger tube. All together, those major calyces also fuse together and form renal pelvis. Through the renal pelvis, the urine flows to ureter. Now, what's the difference between renal sinus and renal hyalum? The central part of the kidney, that bluish circle, which contains renal pelvis, renal calyces, major and minor, blood vessels, nerves, and some amount of fat tissue between them, is called renal sinus. Again, it's a very central part of the kidney that does not include pyramids. What is renal hyalum? That is that black arrow which shows you the entrance, that opening where blood vessels, nerves, and ureter enters the kidney. So that would be a renal hyalum. Blood and nerve supply of the kidneys. Renal arteries deliver approximately 1,200 milliliters of cardiac output to the kidneys each minute. So 1/4 of all the blood that our heart pumps goes to the kidneys. That's a lot. Arterial flow into and venous flow out of the kidneys follow similar paths. Nerve supply is provided by sympathetic fibers. We'll talk more about arteries just in a moment. Blood flow in the kidney. Kidneys receive their blood through the renal artery, the red one, and it originates from abdominal aorta. So as soon as renal artery enters the kidney, it branches into 2 or 3 segmental arteries. Each segmental artery also branches into interlobar arteries, and each interlobar artery goes through the column between 2 pyramids. Then interlobar arteries turn, and after they turn, right now they are called arcuate arteries. Each arcuate artery gives rise to several cortical radiate arteries. So here they are. That is a cortical radiate arteries. Okay. Now we will be looking under the microscope. That is your cortical radiate artery. It gives rise to afferent arteriole, which enters into the structure called glomerulus, like a tuft of capillaries, then exits, and when it exits, it's called afferent arteriole. Then it branches and forms peritubular capillaries, which are sitting next to those renal tubules. In some places, peritubular capillaries go all the way down, and then they are called vasa recta. You'll see it on next slide. Finally, the blood from all those capillaries is collected into their cortical radiate vein. Here is cortical radiate vein. And right now, the blood is collected back through the arcuate veins. They have same names, then interlobar veins, and then we do not have segmental veins. Instead, it will be renal vein. So here is a list of all blood vessels in the kidneys that you need to know in the correct order. Again, abdominal aorta gives rise to renal artery. Renal artery enters the kidneys, branches into 2-3 segmental arteries. They branch into interlobar arteries, go between pyramids in the columns. Then they turn and become arcuate arteries. Each gives rise to several cortical radiate arteries. Now, microscopic small structures. Afferent arteriole enters the glomerulus and then exits and becomes afferent arteriole. Gives rise to 2 types of blood vessels, peritubular capillaries and going all the way down vasa recta, and then exit as cortical radiate vein, arcuate vein, interlobar vein, same names as for the arteries. We only don't have segmental veins. Instead, it will be renal vein that exits the kidneys into inferior vena cava. Now we will talk about microscopic anatomy of the kidneys. And I recommend you from watching the animation, the Nephron. The link is under the video. After you watch it, you can continue the video. So, nephron is a structural and functional unit that forms urine. So, right here, all that is a nephron. Part of the nephron, this part is located in the cortex. That's a border, that line. So, right here there is cortex, right here there is medulla. So, most part of the nephron is located in the cortex. We have more than 1 million of nephrons in each kidney, so they are very small. Each nephron is made of 2 main parts. That would be called a glomerulus. It's a tuft of capillaries. Remember, afferent arterial, glomerulus, and afferent arterial. Everything else right here, starting from the glomerular capsule and all those tubules together, are called renal tubule. So it begins as a shaped glomerular capsule, which also is called Bowman's capsule. Here it is. It surrounds that capillaries, glomerulus, from all the sides. It holds it inside. Next one, renal corpuscle, glomerulus, together with the glomerular capsule surrounding it, all together we call it renal corpuscle. Inside of the renal corpuscle, that glomerulus is made of capillaries, and the walls of those capillaries are made of fenestrated glomerular endothelium. It means they have openings or fenestrations. That allows the filtrate from the blood that comes here. Some filtrate, some part of it, goes outside of those capillaries into the glomerular capsule. So from here, outside into the capsule. Before you continue, please answer the questions for part 1.2. Glomerular capsule. So that's the first part of the neuron, and inside we have a glomerulus. So that would be afferent arterial, that ball of glomerular capillaries, glomerulus, and then there will be afferent arterial. And the part of the nephron tubule that surrounds it is called glomerular capsule. Now a little bit more about its structure. It has parietal layer, the outer layer, this one, which is made of simple squamous epithelium. And it has visceral layer. Visceral layer is shown better in this picture. As you see, that ball of capillaries, each of them is surrounded with special cells called podocytes. They are like sitting and enclosing, hugging those capillaries. Podocytes. So that is the visceral layer of the glomerular capsule. That is parietal, simple squamous epithelium. Now, that's just one of those capillaries inside of the glomerulus. And that is one of those podocytes. Those cells, podocytes, have a body and processes. And each of those processes, extensions, also have smaller, which is we're calling food processes. Excuse me. Those food processes, between them, have filtration slits. Those filtration slits allow liquid part of blood, some blood plasma and substances, to go out of the capillaries through those slits right here into the glomerular capsule. Now, renal tubule. All that starting from the glomerular capsule, all those are renal tubules. And the first part, this part, before the tubule goes all the way down, that is called proximal convoluted tubule. So, starting here, all this part right here, that is proximal convoluted tubule. It is located in the cortex. Its function is reabsorption and secretion, and is lined with cuboidal epithelium. Next part of the tubule is a loop going down and then returning up. When it goes down, it's all the way to the medulla. So that is called loop of Henle, and it's made of 3 segments. Going down would be descending limb, then we have thin segment, and then we have ascending segment or a 6 segment. So thin segment right here, usually in medulla, lined with simple squamous epithelium and freely permeable to water. That thick segment going up right here, it's lined either by cuboidal or columnar cells. Next one, this part is a distal convoluted tubule located in the medulla. Lined with cuboidal cells, main function is secretion. So this one is only in the cortex. Next one, the last part of the nephron would be this one, collecting duct. Collecting duct accepts distal tubules from several nephrons. So that fluid that right here going to the collecting duct, it's already a urine. And special proteins sitting in the walls of the collecting duct, which is lined by simple squamous epithelium, those proteins are called aquaporins. They can be present there or they can be removed by the nephron. So, when antidiuretic hormone, ADH, is produced, then the cells will put aquaporins and open them, and water can be reabsorbed back from the collecting duct into the blood. So, liquid part of urine, water, will be reabsorbed back. What does it do with the amount of urine? Think for a second. That will reduce amount of urine. So when we have antidiuretic hormone, aquaporins are open and some amount of water is reabsorbed, that decreases amount of urine and makes it more thick like that. It's not diluted, it's a thick urine. There are 2 types of nephrons. That is a cortex, and the lower part is medulla. So, cortical nephrons are those that mostly are sitting in the cortex, and only a small part of loop of Henle goes down to the medulla. They make about 85% of nephrons. Juxtamedullary nephrons have a different structure. They have much longer loops of Henle that go deep into medulla, and they produce concentrated urine. Nephron capillary beds. What are those? Those are blood vessels, tiny capillaries, surrounding the nephron tubules, nephron loops, all the way right here. And it all starts from the afferent arteriole that enters into the glomerulus, then glomerulus itself, then will be afferent arteriole. And then afferent arteriole continues as peritubular capillaries. They are here in the medulla. When they go down along the loop of Henle, they become more straight. Right now they are called vasa recta. So those are also capillaries. Before you continue, please answer the questions for part 1.3. Juxtaglomerular apparatus. What is that? Let's look at the nephron structure one more time. That is your glomerulus inside of the glomerular capsule. That would be your proximal convoluted tubule, loop of Henle, and right here would be distal convoluted tubule. In a real nephron, that part of the distal convoluted tubule comes very close to the afferent arteriole, right here. Distal convoluted tubule, afferent arteriole. The cells located between them and on them make juxtaglomerular apparatus. one per nephron, and its function to regulate filtrate formation and to regulate blood pressure. You need to know how exactly it happens. So juxtaglomerular cells, which are located right here on the afferent arterial part, they secrete hormone renin, and also they act as mechanoreceptors that sense blood pressure. When they sense a change in blood pressure, they send signals through the renal nerve to the brain. Macula-densa cells that are sitting in the wall of their distal convoluted tubule. So macula-densa cells, they also act as receptors, chemoreceptors that sense sodium chloride or salt content of the filtrate. Between them, in the center, there are extraglomerular mesangial cells, or simply memorize them as mesangial cells. They may pass signals between macula-densa cells and right here juxtaglomerular granular cells. So what is the function of the juxtaglomerular apparatus? It regulates renin, produces and regulates renin release. Renin is a protein hormone that turns angiotensinogen produced inside the liver into angiotensin 1. That one later is converted to the substance called by angiotensin 2 by special enzyme ACE produced in the lungs. And angiotensin 2 is a substance that first constricts blood vessels and increases blood pressure, and stimulates the release of hormone aldosterone from adrenal glands. Aldosterone also increases blood pressure. You can memorize it better if you look at this picture 25.14. So right here, juxtaglomerular cells produce hormone renin. It goes to the blood. Liver releases a substance called angiotensinogen, which also goes to the blood. Under the influence of renin, angiotensinogen turns into angiotensin 1. A little bit later, ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme produced by lungs, turns angiotensin 1 into angiotensin 2. This substance causes vasoconstriction or constriction of blood vessels all over the body, which increases blood pressure. It has a second function. It also stimulates adrenal cortex of the adrenal glands above the kidneys, and adrenal cortex produces aldosterone, another hormone that can increase blood pressure by stimulating sodium uptake of the distal convoluted tubule. Water goes after the sodium, and it keeps water, retains water in the body, which increases blood volume and increases blood pressure. Okay, please answer the questions for part 1.4.